In mid-September, my cousin Bagas and I decided to explore an old, abandoned school on the outskirts of town. The school had been deserted for years, and many locals had begun to forget about it. However, some of the older residents still warned us to stay away, especially after a student had committed suicide there more than 20 years ago. The school was located at the end of a narrow, seldom-traveled road. The building was deteriorating. The walls were covered in mold, the paint was peeling, and many of the windows were broken. Wild grass had grown high around the grounds, giving the impression that the place had been left to rot for a long time. As we entered, the large wooden door creaked softly as if welcoming us. The air inside was musty and damp, mixed with the smell of dust and rotting wood. Our footsteps creaked on the wooden floor that had long been untouched by human feet. The long corridor in front of us felt eerie and unsettling. Although the sun was still shining outside, the light that seeped into the school was minimal, creating long shadows in every corner. My heart started to race, but curiosity overpowered the creeping fear. We walked down the seemingly endless corridor, with rows of classroom doors on either side. Each step we took echoed, heightening the tension. Suddenly we heard another sound. Footsteps that did not belong to us. The steps were soft and regular, as if someone was following us from behind. Bagas, who was walking ahead, stopped immediately. He turned to me with wide eyes. "Do you hear that?" he asked in a low, almost whispering voice. I nodded, feeling the hairs on my neck stand on end. We both stood still, holding our breath. The footsteps also stopped. The sound of insects outside the school became more pronounced, but the silence inside the old building was suffocating. We exchanged glances, unsure whether to continue or turn back. But curiosity won. We decided to keep going. After a few minutes, we arrived at a classroom that looked disheveled. Desks were overturned, chairs scattered, and the blackboard was covered with scribbles that were hard to decipher. On one wall, there was a row of student photographs, probably from decades ago. However, something odd happened. Every face in the photos was blurred, as if deliberately erased. I stared at the photos, feeling an increasing sense of unease. As we exited the classroom and proceeded to the next corridor, the atmosphere grew even stranger. Each time we walked, we could hear the footsteps following us, getting closer and closer. Bagas looked back again, his face now filled with anxiety. "Someone is following us," he whispered. My heart raced faster. We quickened our pace towards the end of the corridor, where there was an old wooden door slightly ajar. From behind the door came a soft whisper, a child's voice saying, "Help me." Bagas looked at me with a tense expression. Despite the fear seeping into every inch of my body, we decided to see what was behind the door. The door creaked as we pushed it open, revealing a staircase leading down to the basement. The air there was colder and more musty than the rest of the school. Bagas took out his phone and turned on the flashlight, casting a thin beam of light down the dark stairs. We descended cautiously, our steps feeling heavy as though something was holding us back. Downstairs, the sound of footsteps that we had heard earlier grew clearer. The steps were soft but deliberate, moving closer to us. I looked back, but no one was there. We continued deeper into the basement, and when we reached the bottom, the room was empty and silent. Yet we felt an unsettling presence. As we ventured further into the room, the footsteps seemed to be coming from all directions, as if more than one person was following us. The atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Suddenly, from a dark corner of the room, a silhouette of a child in a tattered school uniform appeared. The child's face was pale, and its eyes were hollow, staring at us with a look of despair. "Help me," it said again, its voice clearer this time, more sorrowful. I took a step back, feeling my body tremble. Baga stood frozen beside me, unsure of what to do. The child's figure moved closer, and the footsteps around us grew louder. It felt as if we were surrounded by something unseen. Bagas quickly pulled my sleeve. "We need to get out of here," he shouted. Without waiting any longer, we ran up the stairs, leaving behind the footsteps and the increasingly loud whispers. We sprinted through the long corridor, gasping for breath, with the footsteps still chasing us. When we finally burst out of the school's main door, the sounds ceased abruptly. The cold night air greeted us, and for the first time in minutes I felt I could breathe again. After we left the school, we hurried back home. Even though we were outside, I could still feel the child's gaze, as if it were watching us from behind the broken school windows. The sound of footsteps and the soft whisper of "help me" echoed in my mind. Bagas also didn't say much after the incident. We both knew we had witnessed something we were never meant to see. That night, as I tried to sleep, I heard a faint sound outside my bedroom window. Slow footsteps, drawing closer. But this time I didn't open the window or look outside. I just closed my eyes and hoped the sound would disappear. Bagas and I never returned to that school, and we never spoke of the incident to anyone. Story 2. The Rubber Plantation's Inhabitant. In early September, the weather in my village was still warm, but the gentle breeze carried signs of the coming rainy season. My friend Utuh and I decided to camp on the edge of a rubber plantation next to the wilderness in our village. At that time, it was still not the planting season, so the plantation was rarely visited by its owner. This made us take the initiative to spend the night there, even though an eerie atmosphere settled in as the day grew dark. We chose a small open area to set up our tent, under the canopy of towering rubber trees around us. As night fell, the sounds of crickets and the wind rustling through the rubber tree trunks added to the discomforting ambiance. Even though we had camped here several times before, tonight felt different. While lying inside the tent, we suddenly heard rustling noises from the rubber plantation. The sound came from a direction inconsistent with the wind. Utuh, who had initially joked that it might just be a forest rat, began to look worried as the noise grew louder and closer. Heavy footsteps were heard among the rows of rubber trees. We strained our ears and could make out faint whispers, too soft to understand but clearly human. Utuh sat up and pressed his ear towards the tent's entrance. "You hear that, right?" he asked in a hushed voice. I could only nod, my heart racing faster. Suddenly, through the gaps between the tree trunks, we saw the figure of a man. His face appeared disheveled with unkempt hair. His clothes were tattered and ragged, and his body seemed too thin for a normal human. The figure stood still among the rubber trees as if watching us. I turned on the flashlight and aimed it at the man. The figure seemed startled and disappeared behind a tree. We both froze, too afraid to move. However, the sound of heavy footsteps resumed, getting closer. Utuh decided to leave the tent and investigate further. As soon as he stepped outside, the figure reappeared, this time much closer, only a few meters away from us. The man spoke in a hoarse voice. "Leave now, or I will take you." His voice was threatening and felt increasingly menacing. We didn't wait any longer. Quickly, we ran towards the village road, abandoning our campsite and belongings. As we ran, the sound of heavy footsteps continued to follow us until we reached home. The fear still lingered. We reported the incident to the villagers, but they said it was impossible for anyone to be in the rubber plantation at night. Some even suggested that it might have been a young man from a neighboring village who had gone mad after engaging in failed occult practices. He was said to have become deranged and was often seen wandering around the rubber plantation. Since that day, I can still hear those whispers in my head, calling us back to the plantation. Story 3. The Guardian of the Rice Field. As September was nearing its end, the rice fields in my village were starting to turn yellow, a sign that the rice was ready for harvest. My girlfriend Sonia and I often took walks along the rice field embankments to enjoy the scenery and fresh air. However, that evening felt strange. Despite the bright sunshine, there was a chill that sent shivers through the rice stalks swaying in the wind. we decided to venture deeper into the fields, crossing a small embankment that divided the vast expanse of rice. As we walked, I began to sense something unusual. There were no birds, no cricket sounds, just the strong wind blowing. Then, in the distance, we saw her, a woman standing in the middle of the rice field facing us. The woman wore a tattered kebaya with crumpled, dirty fabric. Her long hair was untangled and disheveled. She stood still, motionless, staring at us with a sharp, hateful gaze. I felt scared, but Sonia tried to reassure me that it was probably just an old farmer living nearby. However, as we approached, the woman suddenly vanished. We continued walking, but the uneasy feeling never left us. Each time we went further, it seemed like we kept returning to the same spot, close to where the woman first appeared. Time felt slow, and I began to feel trapped in an endless loop. Then, as the sky started to darken, the wind picked up, making the rice stalks rustle loudly. Amid the sound of the wind, a soft whisper emerged. "Leave. You're disturbing me." The voice seemed to come from all directions, and the old woman's shadow appeared again, this time much closer, just a few meters away from us. Panicked, we ran as fast as we could towards the village road. Yet, with every step we took, we found ourselves back at the same place. Only when I screamed hysterically did everything suddenly stop. We found ourselves at the edge of the field, right where we had started. The woman was gone. After the incident, we were told that a woman had died in that field years ago after losing her entire rice harvest in a flood disaster. Now she was said to be the guardian of the field, haunting anyone who dared to venture too far. The mystery of the night in Kalimantan. Next Thursday, my friend Roland and I decided to camp in a remote village in central Kalimantan. Before the day, we conducted a site survey to ensure the camping spot. In the evening, after finishing work, we rode a motorbike to the location. The journey took about 30 minutes from the city to our camping site. Upon arriving in the village, we checked the camping area, ensured there was a water source, and cleared the spot of tree branches and weeds. Although the evening went by as usual, something felt off. As the clock struck 5 p.m., I felt a chill run down my spine, my hands felt cold, and the back of my neck felt heavy. The sensation was very unsettling. We both decided to head home early. Once home, I took a shower, following the belief that one should cleanse oneself if feeling any abnormalities. However, despite the shower, the chill and heavy neck feeling did not subside. I felt extremely uneasy. I called my grandfather in the village, known for his knowledge of the supernatural. Calmly, he said, "Wait until midnight and prepare a glass of plain water and bitter coffee in your room." With a bit of anxiety, I followed his instructions. The night seemed to drag on. The discomfort and chills continued to haunt me. When the clock struck midnight, the atmosphere suddenly changed. I felt my body return to normal, and the chill and heavy neck sensation vanished as if they had never been there. However, as I was getting ready to sleep, my phone rang. It was my grandfather calling again. His voice was firm. "There was a female ghost following you from the forest and attaching herself to your body. But don't worry, she has gone after I drove her away." That night, I slept soundly without disturbance. I was accustomed to supernatural occurrences. This was not my first experience with such phenomena. Nevertheless, this experience left a deep impression on me and served as a lesson about how we can never be sure of what follows us in places we consider safe. Story 5. The Shadow of St. Andrew. In mid-September, I went to the small town of St. Andrew for a weekend of exploration and relaxation. I rented a small house on the outskirts of town, offering a lovely view of the surrounding countryside. The house was quaint, with ivy-covered brick walls and an ancient oak tree casting long shadows across the yard. I arrived on a cloudy afternoon, and the overcast sky gave the house an eerie yet inviting atmosphere. The homeowner had left a note explaining that the attic was off-limits due to structural issues, but otherwise the house seemed intact. I unpacked and decided to explore the property before dark. As night fell, I wandered through the overgrown garden, feeling an odd sense of discomfort. The air was thick with the smell of decay, and the old oak tree seemed to watch my every move. I returned to the house and prepared for bed as rain began to gently patter against the window. As I was getting ready to sleep, I heard strange noises from the attic. It sounded like heavy footsteps and scraping, as if someone or something was moving around up there. I tried to ignore it, assuming it was just the house creaking or perhaps the wind. However, as the night progressed, the noises grew louder and more insistent. Unable to sleep, I decided to investigate. I climbed the creaking stairs to the attic, my footsteps echoing in the narrow hallway. The attic door was slightly ajar, and I pushed it open with a creak. The attic was dark and filled with old furniture covered in dust. The scraping noises seemed to come from the far corner of the attic. As I approached, a cold breeze swept through the room, extinguishing my flashlight. I fumbled in the darkness, trying to turn it back on. When the light finally flickered back to life, I saw it. A dark shadow standing next to an old chest. The shadow was tall, with hollow eyes and a mouth that appeared to move silently. I felt a chill run down my spine as the shadow slowly turned toward me, its eyes glowing faintly. I backed away, stumbling over the old furniture. The shadow seemed to follow me, its presence growing more oppressive. I fled from the attic, the silent gaze burning into my back. The next day, I learned from the locals that the house had once belonged to a recluse who vanished under mysterious circumstances. It was said that the shadow in the attic was his restless spirit, trapped forever in the place where he lived in solitude.